So in a political earthquake that's been rumbling under the surface for months, the Nationals have officially walked away from their federal coalition agreement with the Liberal Party. The political marriage that has shaped conservative rule in Australia for over 90 years. But a really big question remains, which no one's really talking about. Is this even legal? My name is Josh and welcome to the West Report. So, we're going to cut to the chase of it, but first I think I need some more appropriate lighting. Much better. Now, straight to the legality issue, right, which no one seems to be talking about. The Liberal Party actually owns the LNP in Queensland. Can they just simply demerge or split up without a court case or legal settlement?
Round one, fight!
So let's go back to the start of this, right? In a press conference yesterday that echoed with barbs and bravado, Nationals leader David Littleproud announced,
"Our party room has got to a position where we will not be re-entering a coalition agreement with the Liberal Party after this election."
But make no mistake, this wasn't really a civil separation. It was a shot across the bow of Susan Lay's leadership, nuclear energy policies as well as net zero, and a stab at the inner circle Liberal dominance.
Nuclear power.
The nuclear power, nuclear energy, nuclear.
Now, as a side note, I find it quite funny that they revived John Howard out of his cryo-sleep chamber, Weekend at Bernie style, to condemn the Nationals' decision. But it looks like it's mostly fallen on deaf ears.
But I don't have a vote in these things anymore, and I haven't been in office for a long time.
Our enemy is the Labor Party, Littleproud said, before laying out the ideological gulf that's opened between the two Conservative partners. The fracture centres on nuclear energy, the death of the Regional Investment Fund, and what the Nationals view as the Liberals' failure to deliver for rural and regional Australia. This isn't the first time that the coalition has collapsed under its own contradictions. In 1975, the Western Australian Nationals walked out over rural policy, only to return a couple of months later. But the most spectacular example came in 1987 during Joe Bjelke-Petersen's infamous Joe for Canberra campaign. Backed by property developers, Bjelke-Petersen broke the federal coalition and took the Queensland Nationals to Canberra by himself, which lasted a heroic 4 months. But, funny fact, when Bob Hawke called the election, Joe was in Disneyland in America, so there was no mobile phones back then or WhatsApp group chats, so Joe's chances of becoming Prime Minister quickly evaporated. So Joe, in hindsight, is now known as quite an authoritarian and corrupt individual, but his legacy lives on, and his story definitely deserves its own video, or for a really good explainer, check out the video from Mr. M History. Really good stuff. But to kind of cut back to the point of this video, here's an angle that we aren't really seeing that much in the media right now. This week's coalition split might lack the fireworks of Joe's rebellion, but legally, it's going to be just as explosive. Possibly. Especially in Queensland. Here at Michael West Media and the West Report, we went digging. And there's one problem that hasn't really been addressed yet. You see, major political parties in this country have their own constitutions. Even the Greens have one. This is to put some guardrails on what their members get up to. Party constitutions govern how the party manages its membership, conducts elections, and sets its own policies, which is very distinct from legal rulings that apply to society at large. So whether political parties stick to their own constitutions is a bit debatable sometimes, like in this case. According to its updated 2022 constitution, the Liberal National Party of Queensland is the successor to both parties, the Liberals and the Nationals. Yet only one gets full status federally. So what do I mean by that? The Liberal National Party, born from a merger in 2008 of the National Party and the Liberal Party, claims to represent both sides, but legally it's stacked in favour of one. So here's the catch, right? Clause A.3 of the LNP Constitution names itself as the Queensland division of the Liberal Party of Australia. Well, the Nationals, they're just affiliated. That small distinction carries really big consequences. The Liberal National Party's assets, branding, and legal identity are all technically owned by the Federal Liberal Party and not the National Party. The Liberal Party's own federal constitution backs this up, naming the LNP as its Queensland division on page 2. In legal terms, the LNP isn't a partnership, it's Liberal territory, and the Nationals may be squatting on borrowed ground. Legally, on paper, it means that the Liberal National Party in Queensland is not actually a combination of the two, but instead a subdivision of the Liberal Party. But the Nationals kind of see this differently, right? The federal constitution of the National Party of Australia explicitly recognises the LNP as a full affiliated party alongside other state national branches like New South Wales and Victoria. Now, this status grants the LNP voting rights, representation and candidate endorsement powers within the federal national structure. So while the Liberals claim the LNP as their Queensland division, the Nationals treat it as an equal partner, setting the stage for a constitutional tug-of-war if either side tries to pull it apart. Except both teams are wearing the same shirt. Now, in practice, right, what this actually means is that the Liberal National Party of Queensland's branding, infrastructure, financials, and legal standing are anchored to the Liberal Party, while the Nationals are constitutionally treated as affiliates, not co-owners. So this looks like it could trigger some serious financial headaches for the Nationals if they were to campaign separately to the LNP in Queensland in the next election. This is some more boring finance stuff, but bear with me. Under Section S of the LNP Constitution, all funds, property and assets are owned by the party, not by individual members or branches. Ensures that even closed branches must return their assets to the party. Now that means if the Nationals walk away, that will likely leave them empty-handed, losing access to campaign funds, donor lists and infrastructure. Politically they can split. Legally and financially, well, they could be stranded. Now if Littleproud and his faction attempts a hard separation in Queensland, they may well trigger a party room war and internal legal action. Even without the hardline divorce, what will happen to the shared resources of the combined party? Who gets what? Especially when it comes to electoral funding. And then there's the weird politics of it all, right? So Ted O'Brien, who is the federal Liberal deputy leader and a Queenslander, and the architect of the previous government's plans for small modular reactors, nuclear, remains a member of the same party as David Littleproud, the Liberal National Party. I mean, technically they're in the same organisation, right? But one is the face of the Nationals and the other is the Liberals' number 2 in charge. And look, right here on their website, they are right next to each other. The dynamic is further complicated by an informal internal agreement. New LNP members tend to affiliate with whichever party held the seat last if they're elected. So what that means is if an LNP candidate wins a seat previously held by Labor or the Greens, and the last LNP member sat with the Liberals, that will go Liberals. And if the last one was a National, then they will go National. Most Brisbane and Gold Coast MPs sit with the Liberals, while rural members tend to join the Nationals. But that's an informal agreement, not part of their constitution. The result is a party where the deputy leader and half of the backbench don't even see eye to eye on what party they're actually in. So look, let's get to the juicy part, right? What is Littleproud's play here? Littleproud framed the Nationals' decision as a principled stand rather than a political stunt.
What we have got to a position is that the National Party will sit alone on a principled basis. This is one of the hardest political decisions of my life.
This is one of the hardest decisions of my life, he said. But it's about principle, a foreign concept that some of you may not understand. Trying to antagonise the press, of course. There's speculation that he's trying to carve out a distinct identity for the Nationals ahead of the next federal election, but until then we don't really know what's going on. With the coalition losing support in the suburbs, the Nationals are retreating to their rural base, waving the nuclear flag and stoking resentment over net zero commitments. Their core policy disagreements were on nuclear energy, divestiture powers for supermarkets and the Regional Australia Super Fund. It was a very Machiavellian power play if there was one. There's also this weird point about cell phone reception in the bush that he kept bringing up, but I don't fully understand how that's the Liberals' fault, but sure.
The mobile phone towers, mobile phone tower, big phone tower now.
Look, some of these issues do make sense, right? The Nats want to posture to make it look like they're standing up for regional Australia. Some of these things are good ideas, such as break-up powers for the supermarkets if they get caught price gouging. Other policies such as nuclear seems like it's in direct conflict with the rest of Australia's sentiments. Considering the locations that these nuclear reactors would go in are regional seats, the majority of Australians don't want this. The election should have been clear. And look, whatever, this video is not on nuclear, so we'll move on. Would this breakup have happened if Senator Matt Canavan won the leadership, who is notably anti-nuclear? What about if Angus Taylor won the Liberal spill? Is this motion from the Nationals to try and pull the coalition further to the right on some wild policies and usurp Susan Ley with Angus? Is it due to the National Party backers, the coal and the gas lobbyists wanting to protect their resource industry while flogging our resources on the cheap off overseas with very little tax paid to Australians? Is it that Sky News, which is now free to rural areas, their echo chamber hasn't been breached in the regions and they actually think the population wants these kind of policies? Look, some of this speculation is probably above my pay grade, but what I will conclude with is this. There is no conceivable way that the National or Liberal parties can win the next election on their own. They will have to rejoin at one point. I don't think this dummy spit will play out in the way that the Nationals think it will. Unless we have an incredibly major upset in our political landscape, which, considering the last election, anything might be possible. And look, to sum this up, you gotta feel sorry for Peter Dutton, right? Surely. The political climate has been nothing short of volatile. The Liberals lost one of their safest seats in a historic election, making the first time in Australian history that an opposition actually lost their own seat. And while at the same time, Labor increased their support, which has never ever happened for an incumbent government. How terrible of an opposition leader do you have to be? Now the coalition is broken. Dutton's legacy may be well defined, but not by his policies, but the historic defeats mounting under his watch. To the man who once claimed his opponent to be a beta male, has now caused one of the biggest political cascades in this country's history. Meanwhile, Littleproud is betting the farm that the Nationals are better off on their own. And maybe they are, but they definitely have a lot of legal and financial troubles ahead.